on to the final session of day 3, the session 3, Framing Learning Outcomes According to Bloom's Taxonomy by Ma'am Dr. Anju Tandon. Bloom's Taxonomy, a powerful framework that helps us design educational objectives that are clear, measurable, and effective. By aligning our learning outcomes with Bloom's taxonomy, we can ensure that our lessons cater to diverse range of cognitive abilities, promoting deeper understanding and critical thinking in our students. But sometimes it becomes challenging to understand if a particular outcome or domain falls under analysis, evaluate, or apply. So, in order to give us a hands on knowledge and resolve the nitty gritties of framing accurate learning outcomes, we have amongst us Ma'am Dr. Anju Tandon. She is the principal of Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, Mehta Vidyalaya, New Delhi. Ma'am holds 32 years of experience as principal and teacher in leading CBSE public schools across the country. She has authored English grammar and composition practice books and mental mathematics practice book. She is a certified resource person for teachers training under the aegis of CBSE and develops online teachers training module for CBSE. Ma'am is the recipient of CBSE Award 2014, Delhi State Teachers Award 2020, Principal of the Year by Mathematics Teachers Association the year 2012, and Distinguished Educational Award 2012. And my dear audience, the list is endless. There are many more awards which ma'am is a recipient too. As principal, under the guidance of hers, the school bagged International School Award by British Council of India, and she even introduced quality accreditation standards by Quality Control of India, NCC and Scouts and Guides, and many more. Ma'am even visited South Korea as cultural ambassador by the Korea Culture Center, Embassy of Republic of Korea. Ma'am, we're really proud of that. So may we now request Ma'am Dr. Anju Tandon to take over the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Joshi, for such high words that lifts our spirit. And at the onset, would like to thank our Regional Education Officer, Dr. Ranil Sharma, for organizing this very, very important, useful teachers training program. And not only this, it's a continuous process, and Dr. Sharma ensures that this teachers training goes on. And this continuum that he's maintaining in the teaching learning process is what matters most. And we're really grateful to him for his academic mentor for all of us, and grateful to you, sir, for organizing this very meaningful session for all the teachers. And I'm sure all the teachers who are participating are greatly benefited by this in-house peer teaching program by Bhavans itself. So, as Ms. Prerna already said, that I'm going to now talk about Bloom's taxonomy and how to prepare the learning outcomes. Means we have to reach out to the last person in the classroom, that is our learner. And through learning outcomes, well-prepared learning outcomes, we reach out to the learner, who's the ultimate beneficiary of the teaching learning process. So may I have the slideshow, please? Thank you. Thank you. So as a part of this faculty development program, today we are talking about the Bloom's taxonomy and how to frame the learning outcomes, which is now also one of the most important recommendations of the National Education Policy 2020. And I think all Bhavan schools are forward-looking schools, and each school is now ready to implement and has partially implemented the National Education Policy in their respective schools. Next, please. So before we start, I would like to just state the objectives of this session. So by the end of this session, we'll be able to identify the difference between objective and learning objectives and learning outcomes. And we'll be able to define and describe a smart learning outcome and how to write it, how to write the learning outcomes, and to learn the importance of setting smart learning outcomes for effective teaching learning process. And the next objective is to be able to state the revised Bloom's taxonomy. It's 3 domains. So by the end of the my session, I think all the teachers would know the 3 different domains of the Bloom's taxonomy, which we are in any case using it in the classroom situation day in, day out. But here I'm going to throw some more light on the 3 different domains of Bloom's taxonomy, that is the affective, cognitive, and the psychomotor domain, and how to frame the learning outcome based on Bloom's taxonomy. So next, let me now put a question to you all. What, according to you, is a one-word answer for what are learning outcomes? Just type it in the text, and I'm sure each one of us know what are learning outcomes. It's nothing new for us. So that you don't go off to sleep, I would like to see how many of you are participating and typing what are the learning outcomes to your understanding at this moment. What are learning outcomes? कोई टाइप करा है chat box. Somebody is written expected outcomes after. Yes, expected outcome, absolutely right. Another definition, some more words that I'm looking for. What are learning outcomes? Can we have some more answers, please? Are we here? Are we in? I'm not getting the answers. Let the mics be on and let teachers say it. What are learning outcomes?
Ma'am, they should be measurable.
Okay,
What the child learns
something
at
that
the end
is
of the lesson.
measurable. Something that is measurable. Very good answer. Then somebody has also said application of knowledge. Absolutely. Somebody has written, now I can read the chat box, also some behavioral changes. Yeah, I can see measurable. Some students with the relating it to the learning, to the present situation. Specify what learners will achieve, focus on learners' perspective. Yes, absolutely. Many definitions are coming now. Yes, demonstrating learning outcomes are uh, demonstrating responsibilities, accountability, absolutely. Better understanding and application. I think Sheetal has written better application. Uh, Avantika says that enhancing child skill. Absolutely, Avantika. You've written the right word, enhancing the skills of the child. That is the learning outcome. Yes, I agree. Better understanding and application. The takeaways. I think Anu has written the takeaways. Yes. Then outcomes are aligned to learning objectives. Absolutely, they are. It guides the assessment and evaluation. Another good answer which has come is that it guides. Uh, it guides assessment evaluation. Absolutely. Then well-defined learning outcome help the educators. Definitely. So I think we are there. We are almost there. We know what the learning outcomes are. Back, please go back. Don't change the slide. So children, they learn a variety of ways. As teachers, we know that children learn variety of ways. They learn by listening. They learn by reading, playing, interacting with others. They learn also by doing by themselves. So learning leads to a change in behavior, whatever way they learn, and whatever learning they get from our teaching, it ultimately leads to a change in behavior. And these changes, what are these changes? Are these change in behavior. When these changes are observed and assessed, it is often termed as learning outcomes. So you're almost there. Many of you have said that it helps in assessment, it guides us for better, it guides us for inculcating various skills in the students. So that is what the learning. So therefore learning outcomes, the very process of learning which leads to development of competencies, is learning outcome. When there is change in behavior, change in what they do, is learning outcome. So it's a continuous process, it's a spiral process. It does not happen in a linear manner. It is a spiral process. Sometimes we keep on taking rounds at one place only, since it is spiral. Sometimes we take a higher round of the learning outcome. So it's not flat, it's not linear, it's continuous. It's spiral in nature. Therefore, learning and outcome cannot be achieved by on content given in the textbook. This is very, very important. Learning outcomes are not textbook based, but these are directly linked to our means the teachers, to teachers curricular expectation, and are process based. These are not content based. This is one important takeaway which I want all the teachers to learn and remember, that it is not textbook or classroom based, it is process based. So literature generally considers learning outcome as an end product or a result. And competencies, when you talk about competencies, you'll ask what is the difference between a competency and learning outcome. So the literal meaning, when we talk about the literal meaning of learning outcome, it will define it as an end product, and competency as a state of being skilled. But when learning happens in continuum, in spiral form, the learner happens to be in state of learning or in the process of learning. It's never a end product. The learning goes on and on. Therefore, it is said that learning is a continuous process. Learning is not an end product. There is always a scope of improvement. There is always a scope for teacher to reflect and see how can it be improved. Therefore, before I proceed further and give you the formal definitions and differences, I would like to say that learning outcome is process-based approach, and learning outcome are competencies which the learner continue to develop and improve. This you must remember, that learning outcomes are competencies which the learner continue to develop and improve. Next slide, please. Now, learning outcomes, when you look at the definition, it will talk about all that you have already written in the chat box. All the teachers have very well written and given one word definition of learning outcome. It reflects what the learner will be able to do as a result of participating in an educational activity. It addresses the educational needs, that is knowledge, skills, and practices that contribute to achieving the learning outcome. It also describes or lists the measurable. One teacher said that learning outcomes are measurable. Yes, very much. Learning outcomes are measurable. It lists the measurable and essential mastered content, knowledge by reflecting the skills, the competencies, the knowledge that student will achieve and can demonstrate in their behavior, in their attitude, in their capacity upon successfully completing the course. That is, it is learner centric. Therefore, anything and everything we do, the ultimate beneficiary of that process is the learner. Therefore, learning outcomes are not meant for teachers, it is meant for the students, because the behavioral change, the attitudinal change, the skill set change is in the student, not in the teacher. So therefore, it is said that learning outcomes are learner centric. Outcomes express the higher level of thing. Basically, outcomes are any change. To begin with, we can say that outcomes are any change, but learning outcomes express the higher level of thinking that integrate course, content, activities, and can be observed as behavioral skill and discrete usable knowledge upon completing the course. Discrete usable knowledge. Like you say, after the course, the child will be able to write three-letter word himself, or he'll be able to read a three-letter word himself. C-A-T, cat, cat. He's read it. So once he reads these three-letter words after joining or after teaching him alphabet, is a discrete knowledge that the teacher has given him. That can be demonstrated, seen, checked, assessed, measured. So this is learning outcome. Next. So now you see there are certain myths and beliefs. As teachers, we were so far groomed to frame the learning objectives. We'd become very much perfect and used to learning objectives and learning outcomes. Now the focus on learning outcome is a shift that national policy on education is now guiding us to undertake. So it's a shift from learning objectives to learning outcome. Why shift? Because learning objectives are teacher oriented. Outcomes, as I've already said, is student learner centric.
Richa ma'am, please mute yourself.
पहले देखना हाँ देख लेते हैं लक्ष्य
Richa ma'am.
I think, ma'am, Prerna ma'am, those who do not have the camera problem or the bandwidth problem can switch on the cameras so that we are able to relate, because otherwise I will keep on speaking in silos without knowing. So if possible, I request the teachers to switch on the cameras, so that gives the inputs to the speaker or the resource person to move ahead. So that's good. Thank you. So now let's quickly check the difference between the learning objectives and learning outcomes. Next slide, please. So as the definition, learning objectives are specific statement detailing what the instructor intends to teach, whereas learning outcomes are statement specifying what learners will know, what they will be able to, what changes, what they will demonstrate after the lesson or the curriculum or the course, whatever you planned. Then the focus is what the intention of the instructor, whereas here the focus is on what the learner will achieve, will get in hand, what will be the takeaway for the learner after the class. The perspective is instructor centered, this is student centered. We all have understood this, I hope. And the time frame objective can be long term, it can be for the full course also, it can be short term as well, whereas by and large the achievable learning outcomes that can be measured and assessed are short term. In a lesson plan, you often plan 2 or 3 for a period, 40 minutes period, whatever outcomes you can achieve in those 40 minutes or 35 minutes. It's not very long term. And purpose is always guide instructor and assessment designs, whereas here measure student achievement and course, and how effective were your pedagogy. This guides the teacher, the learning outcome guide the teacher that this worked, this did not work. This technique worked very well with the student. They've understood it thoroughly. Whereas this particular technique didn't work so well. So it gives a chance to the instructor to reflect back and do modification in the teaching learning process. That is the reason now more emphasis looking at these differences which are major. It's not a teacher centric class. All the education policies said that teacher is just the manager of the class. Teacher is just the facilitator of the class. Ultimate, the difference should be seen in the student, which is learning outcome. So this, looking at these major differences, National Education Policy 2020 is now talking about learning outcomes in your lesson plans, which are very, very important, and how to frame it. Next, please. Now, learning outcomes, basically, when you have already seen the objectives and outcomes. Objectives are long term, it can be attained after the complete course completion, and that is teacher centric. When you talk about learning outcomes, these learning outcomes are smart learning. The abbreviation given is SMART. That is, S stands for specific, because these are specifically related to what are you going to teach in a particular class in particular time. These are measurable. Each class, after each class, teacher should obtain a feedback how effective her lesson plan was. So these learning outcomes should be measurable, achievable. Again, achievable is important because you should plan. Like, these are the learning outcome, 15 learning outcomes. That means 15 learning outcomes will be achieved in 15 days class. So in 1 day's class, I can achieve only 2 learning outcomes that I can test also, I can observe also, I can assess also. So you should plan. The learning outcomes are always achievable. Sometimes learning objectives are not fully achievable. We plan a lot. Teachers are always very aspirational. So in our objectives, we plan so many things, but not everything is achieved. But learning outcomes, when you have planned, these should be achievable. They should be such that you are able to achieve in a defined period of time. May it be 1 week, may it be 1 class, may it be 3 days, whatever learning outcomes you have planned, it should be achievable in a defined period of time. It should be relevant. Relevant to what? Relevant to the content of that particular class or period or week for that matter. And these should be achievable. And it's time bound. It goes without saying that for achieving the learning outcome, it's important that time is specified. When are you going to achieve? And it should be assessed. So next, please. So now let's talk about in nutshell and quickly what are learning outcomes and what are smart learning. So learning outcome is a statement. In fact, it describes what students are expected to know, understand, will be able to do after completing a learning activity, course, or program. Whereas a smart learning objective is outcome is more refined way of more structured version of a learning outcome, where you have used SMART, the abbreviation, where you have used specific, measurable, attainable, and all these abbreviations. You have been able to, you are relevant and time bound, you are able to achieve this. Then it makes it SMART. Then it provides a general sense of expected achievement. हाँ, क्लास हो गई, समझ आ गया, हाँ आ गया, सब आ गया. Whereas 50% क्लास को तो सब आया नहीं. ठीक है ना? तो इसको it adheres to a SMART criteria, making it specific. You have to measure. It becomes learning outcome only when you are able to measure and gauge what they have specifically achieved. How many have achieved? How many needs a redo? for the class? Should I change the teaching methodology? These are auditory learners. They have not learned anything by the visual inputs that I gave, by the video that I have shown. Probably they have not understood anything. So now these are my auditory learners. Probably I'll give them a listening assignment and they'll learn better. So these are more smart. Learning outcomes are smart, and the framework ensures that learning outcome is clear and precise and make it easier to assess. इतने सारे लर्निंग आउटकम्स नहीं बना सकते और हम ऐसे भी नहीं बना सकते जो अचीव ही नहीं हो सकते. छोटे लर्निंग आउटकम बनेंगे लेकिन वो अचीवेबल और मेजरेबल और टाइम बाउंड और रेलेवेंट होंगे उस पर्टिकुलर क्लास के लिए. दैट इज व्हाई दीज आर कॉल्ड smart learning outcome. I often give the example of dressing up. Everyone dresses up before coming to school. Some of them out, the entire lot of teachers come very well dressed up because teachers are the most dressed up people I have seen. They come very smartly dressed up. But some of them, do that extra care to smartly dress up. And then we call them looking very smart today. Sari gives a very soothing look, very summery where you have it gives a very, good look, soothing look to the eyes. So there is always a difference between dressing up. Everyone wears a salwar kameez or a sari and aa jate hain, but smartly dressing up, taking care of everything. What is going to be the impact on the classroom when I enter the classroom? So that is smart dressing up. Similarly, learning outcomes, you can generally call anything as learning, whatever you teach as learning. But when you make it smart, it has to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. अगर आपने स्मार्ट ड्रेसिंग करा है तो आपका कलर कॉम्बिनेशन बहुत अपीलिंग होना चाहिए, तभी आप स्मार्ट ड्रेसिंग में जाओगे. आपकी ज्वेलरी मैचिंग होनी चाहिए आपके क्लोथ्स के साथ. ऐसे ही कुछ भी नहीं डाला होना चाहिए कि वो आपको स्मार्ट की डेफिनेशन में डाल देगा. आपके इयररिंग्स कैची होने चाहिए कि आपकी स्मार्ट ड्रेस, आपकी हेयर स्टाइल ऐसी होनी चाहिए कि वो आपको स्मार्ट की कैटेगरी में. Isn't it? Am I right or wrong? Say yes or no. Quickly type it on. Quickly type.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So there is difference between learning outcome and smart learning. So our focus is smart learning today. Next slide, please. Next. Next slide. There is some technical glitch. I think you have to go back. Go back. Okay. Next. So, importance of smart learning outcome for effective teaching learning. Smart, as I've already said, setting smart learning outcome is very crucial for effective teaching learning, as it provides a clear, measurable, and attainable goals that guide both instructor as well as the students. Next, please. So, why specific? Because when you are specific, it lends you clarity. Specific outcomes eliminate the ambiguity part. I will explain to you better when I talk about the verbs that you're going to use to remove the ambiguity. It ensures both the teacher and student understand the expected result, and it focuses on help the children in concentrating, and their effort should also focus on the skill and the knowledge area, avoiding distraction from the irrelevant content. It is measurable because it should be assessed. It provides a clear criteria for evaluating the students' this thing and allows a meaningful feedback to the students also. I could do it, I could not do it, I need more in. Therefore, learning outcome have to be measurable, that it gives a feedback to the teacher as well as to the student both. it should be realistic. When I talk about achievable, it should be realistic. How many are learning outcome कि हम ये भी कर लेंगे, ये भी कर लेंगे इसलिए it has to be very realistic and shows that goals are within the student. जो बच्चे कर पाए एक पीरियड के अंदर वही लर्निंग आउटकम हो सकते हैं, and it motivates the students to build, and it should give confidence. एक बच्चों के अंदर एक सेंस ऑफ अचीवमेंट आना चाहिए कि हमारी क्लास के बाद हमें ये आ गया, दिस इज द चेंज. और अगर बच्चे ब्लैंक क्लास से निकल जाते हैं ये कह कि यस मैम सब आ गया, हमको समझ लिया, हमें नेवर गिव्स अ सेंस ऑफ अचीवमेंट. इट ओनली गिव्स अ सेंस कि मुझे तो कुछ समझ ही नहीं आ रहा क्लास में, whereas मैंने तो हाँ हाँ बोल दिया क्लास के अंदर. So it should be relevant also, that it ensure learning outcomes are aligned with the course objective. The overall objective of the course are aligned. It should not go hayway and engage the students. When the learning outcomes are relevant, obviously it will keep the students engaged in the classroom. And then time bound, unless there is a deadline. अगर हम क्वेश्चन पेपर सेट करना है टीचर्स को, ये ना बताएं कि भाई नेक्स्ट 1 वीक में सारे क्वेश्चन पेपर्स आ जाने चाहिए, क्या वो आएंगे टाइम से, नहीं आएंगे. तो उसी तरह लर्निंग आउटकम भी टाइम बाउंड है. इट गिव्स अ सेंस ऑफ अर्जेंसी कि हाँ हमें करना है, इसी पीरियड में करना है, कोशिश करनी है कि हमें ये चीज इसी क्लास या इस 1 वीक के टाइम टाइम में, डेडलाइन में आ जाए. एंड why it is important? Because it helps in tracking the progress over a specific period of time. बच्चे ने सीखा कि नहीं सीखा, what other strategies are needed to make him learn. Next please. Next. So now quickly I'm coming to how to write smart learning outcome. That was the another objective, that after this particular session you will be able to understand and you'll be able to bring a change in your lesson planning when you do the class lesson plan. Next, how? We are going to focus on how. So I would say, I'm just giving an example to you all for understanding. I would say by the end of this unit, student will be able to describe the scientific methods and provide application examples for its application. Is it smart? Is it smart? Yes or no?
Yes.
Is it smart?
Yes, ma'am.
So what I am saying, how it makes it specific, first of all, let me see. It's there on the board only. How it makes it specific? You can type it. How it makes it specific? It's already there on the slide, teachers.
Because we have to provide examples that makes it specific.
They'll be able to provide
Examples.
Okay, yes. Also, it clearly says specific, it focuses on the scientific method. Do you see? By the end of the year, student will be able to describe the scientific method. It's a specific thing. They're talking about the scientific method. Then how it is measurable?
Describe and provide examples.
Absolutely. Because once they have understood the scientific method, how will you measure it? What will you ask the student? Give example. In the class, write 5 examples. So once they are able to give you 5, 2, 3, whatever examples you've asked them to do, that makes it measurable. Then again, your learning objective says how it is achievable.
This is appropriate for introductory level.
Yes, it's an introductory level course. Then how it is result oriented, it focuses on the result, it describes and it provide example. क्योंकि आपका जो learning outcome है वो specially focus कर रहा है कि by the end of the unit ये यूनिट खत्म होगा तो बच्चे एग्जाम्पल दे देंगे scientific method ke. So therefore it is result oriented, and how it is time bound. Student knows that this skill they should be mastered. It should be mastered by them by the end of the unit, because it is written by the end of the unit. They will understand the scientific methods and they will be able to provide the examples which makes it measurable. So this is a smart learning objective. Next. Now, when you write the smart learning objectives, you keep it very simple. You use the work that have precise meaning. You focus on what the learners will be able to do. You'll focus on learning outcome, not on the process. And it helps to start the phrase by the end of this. Will be able to. The students will be, that will be the change in their behavior or the skill. Whatever you say will be able to do after this. Next. So, generally, how it will help you to understand better. The following shows that verb and phrases on the left to avoid. Now, generally, we say students would know in our lesson plans. And we say students will understand. We also say students will fully understand. या हमारा learning outcome होता है be familiar with or learn the basics of or gain the knowledge of. But whatever you see here, it should be avoided in the lesson plan because these are not smart words. They may be used as learning outcomes, but you cannot, students would know. So will you be able to measure what they know here? Will your class be able to measure that? So it's not smart. When you say students will understand, normally what we do, we write all these phrases in our lesson plans. Do we or do we not?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, we do write.
We write students will know, students will understand, students will fully understand, whereas we don't know whether they have understood or not, fully or partially or not, we have no. So these words should be avoided when you're planning a lesson plans because these cannot be measured. You cannot gauge the understanding. You do not have a scale कि आप सिर में डाल दो कि समझ गया कि नहीं समझ गया, थर्मामीटर के जैसे. इसलिए ये वर्ड्स जो हैं बहुत वेग हैं. These are vague words. So when the teacher tries to avoid the smart learner, she writes all these words in her lesson plan. That वो fully understand कर लेगा, वो familiar हो जाएगा, वो basics तो समझ ही जाएगा. बट बेसिक कब समझेगा? जब आप उससे कुछ कराओगे. तो आपके verbs जो Bloom's here comes the role of Bloom's taxonomy. The verbs that you are using in your lesson plan. So you have to use words and phrases like state. When you say that after my lesson, students will be able to state this. They will be able to describe. No, backslide please. They will be able to suggest reason why. So they'll give me 2 reasons why in their notebooks. So if they have given you reason, 2 reasons, 3 reasons, 5 reasons, that means your learning outcome is smart. You are able to check it in the reasons. So once they give the reason, you will be able to gauge the understanding of the lesson. They'll be able to explain. They can compare between the 2 things. So when they are able to compare, obviously it's a higher order and it can be seen in their change, in their behavior, in their attitude. There are 2 things. Junk food versus homemade food. When you have given them, this is the topic for your class, you say junk food versus, you have taught them. जब उन्होंने कंपेयर करके अपनी लाइफस्टाइल में लाया या उन्होंने एग्जाम्पल दे दिए कि व्हाई इट इज बेनिफिशियल फॉर देयर हेल्थ, दैट मीन्स योर लेसन प्लान हैज बीन सक्सेसफुल. You've been able to bring about some behavioral change in the student. They're able to distinguish, they're able to compare the merits and the demerits of a particular thing. So next, now we come to the part 2 of what objectives I'd set in the beginning, and next. So we all have heard about Benjamin Bloom, or rather, we begin our career hearing when we do a B.Ed course, we only think about Benjamin Bloom. We are taught about Benjamin Bloom, but uh, you know, sometimes it's a sad state that we are not able to understand it fully and use it to our classroom level. As a theory we understand it very well, but how to bring it down to the classroom teaching, we are not able to do it, and we often misuse the Bloom's taxonomy in the teaching learning process. So what is Bloom's taxonomy? It is a hierarchical classification of different levels of thinking and learning, originally developed by educationist Benjamin Bloom and his colleagues in mid-20s. Therefore, it is now a mandatory and essential part of all the teacher training program. So this taxonomy aims to promote higher form of thinking. Basically it is meant for higher form of thinking. And whereas in the teaching learning process, we mainly focus on the lower parts of the Bloom's taxonomy. We do use Bloom's taxonomy, but our entire focus is on the lower thinking skills, understanding, remembering, recalling. We are only focused on that. Basically, the taxonomy aims at taking from lower to the higher level. We hardly attempt to take the student to the higher level. So now new national policy, this national policy in education is now talking about HOTS. It's only talking about competencies, and competencies are what? Higher thinking skills. So Bloom's taxonomy is to be used in the classroom to promote the higher level of higher forms of thinking in education, such as analyzing, evaluating, rather than just remembering. Therefore, when you read NEP, it begins, it has to go outside the classroom. It is not content based. Teachers should move away from textbooks. Why? Because it is the taxonomy is not content. I said in the beginning only, it's not content based, it's the process based, it's teacher based, and it is for the teacher to take the student from the lower order thinking skills to gradually to the higher. Whereas the entire teaching process, we as teachers focus on the lower thinking skills, rote memorization, textbook based question answers, finishing the lesson, lecture based, कि हमें तो कोर्स कंप्लीट करना है, एनसीईआरटी ने किताब दी है, इसमें 12 लेसन है, ये 12 लेसन पढ़ाएंगे, इसके पीछे के क्वेश्चन आंसर याद करा लेंगे, अंडरस्टैंड कर लेगा, एग्जाम में टेस्ट करेंगे, उसी के बेस पे उसको मार्क्स दे देंगे. तभी हमारे बच्चे जो रिक्वायर्ड स्किल्स थे उसमें ग्रेजुअली डेफिशिएंट हो गए, बिकॉज ब्रिटिशर्स की पॉलिसी कुछ और ही थी. उनकी पॉलिसी थी सिर्फ एक समझने, लर्ने, लिखने, बोलने, कम्युनिकेट करने, उनको ऑर्डर्स को समझने, स्पोकन इंग्लिश पे एम्फेसिस देने वाले बच्चे जो कि क्लरिकल लेवल पे उनके सिस्टम में सूट हो सके. बहुत से एजुकेशन कमीशन ने रिकमेंडेशंस दिया था, लेकिन वो नीचे ग्रास रूट लेवल तक नहीं आ पाया था सो फार. एंड हमने भी अभी तक ब्लूम्स टेक्सोनॉमी, जिसको हम क्लासरूम में चेक करते हैं, टेस्ट करते हैं, उसको भी अभी तक अच्छा नहीं, क्योंकि हमने भी अपनी एजुकेशन पॉलिसी को टोटली टेक्स्ट बुक ओरिएंटेड, कंटेंट ओरिएंटेड बना के रखा हुआ था. अगर हम कंटेंट ओरिएंटेड हमारी टीचिंग, हमारी पेडागोजी को हम अडॉप्ट करते हैं, तो हम लोअर ऑर्डर पे ही रहेंगे, हम हायर ऑर्डर पे जा ही नहीं सकते, बिकॉज इट फोकसेस ऑन रिमेम्बरिंग, recalling, reproducing what you have learned in the classroom in the exam book, vomiting, and then forgetting forever. So this kind of education policy only focuses on exam. It's exam oriented. It's not learning oriented. So Bloom's taxonomy basically aims to promote the higher order thinking, and it serves as a valuable tool for all education to design the curriculum and the assessment that focuses on critical thinking and deeper understanding of the subject. Our children are lacking in that, and that is the why PISA test, when it was done, it was based on competencies. Our children were not prepared, and we were last but one. So that is why this new education policy, national education policy, is now focusing on the higher order competencies. And class 10th question papers are already changed. There's 50% competency based question. And in class 12th also 50%. Gradually it is going to increase, and it is going to move away from the textbook teaching. It will only be competency based learning in the classroom. So it's better we understand now, so that for us, the shift is not a jolt. How we should plan our lessons, how we should plan our classroom teaching, what should our lesson plan look like, what kind of verbs you should use in your lesson plan, how you should measure the learning outcome. All this is important for all of us to understand. Next, please. Now revise, then there was a little change in 1990s, and then this revised Bloom's taxonomy features several changes, including renaming and reordering of cognitive levels, that higher level. And the use of verbs now came into force in 1990 instead of noun. So you can see it in the next. Next, please. See, this is the basically the change. Now the lower order are the three skills. Initially in 56, when this taxonomy was floated into the education arena, it focused on the nouns. It said knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. 2001, there was a change, and evaluation came this last but one, and create became the top skill that the student, and each teacher should aim at reaching the level when our students are able to create something new, when they become master of their learning. So as of now, you all would agree with me that our focus, our system focuses on the lower orders. And now if we want to implement learning outcomes, we want to implement national policy on education, we have to move to the higher order, from lower to the higher, the arrow says, and from nouns to verbs, obviously. Yes. Next. So Bloom's taxonomy means, remember means just to recall something, basic concepts, define, duplicate, list, memorize, repeat. हमारा क्वेश्चन पेपर में आप यही वाले वर्ब्स देखोगे नीचे वाले. नेक्स्ट जब हम थोड़ा सा ऊपर चले जाते हैं उस क्वेश्चन पेपर बनाने में, तो हम बोल देते हैं explain the ideas or the concept. They'll be able to classify, describe, discuss, explain, and verbs like this. Then when we move a little more higher, we say they'll be executing, they'll implement, they will solve the problems given to them. They'll use it in their day-to-day life. They'll demonstrate change in their behavior, or they'll interpret, and verbs like this. Now, when they move to the highest three levels, and they are able to draw connection among the ideas. So this is where our education policy should lead to. We should move from remember, understand, and apply to analyze, evaluate, and create. So each of our lesson plans should have something, some options for analyzing, some option for evaluating, some options for creating, and that is when we will have the real smart learning outcome. That is where we'll shift to the competency based education. Here, this will be the skills. The higher top orders are the skills that children acquire after your lesson. So when they are start acquiring the competencies, they are able to differentiate, they're able to organize, they're able to relate, compare, contrast, use it in their own real life situation, distinguish, examine, experiment. Then they reach the analysis level. When they evaluate, when they are able to evaluate something, when this behavioral change is seen in the students, they are able to evaluate, they are able to appraise, they are able to argue, they are able to defend their point of view. You know, the teacher cannot give a shut up clause, sit down. They will defend why this is not right. They will be able to judge between the two things. What option is right? They will support, they will value, they will critique. So when the students reach the evaluation level, these are the behavioral changes that will come in them. These are the verbs that should be used in the lesson plan for the teacher. The teachers, if they aim higher order thinking skills, the verb should altogether change. And then finally, when they reach the create level, they design their own plan. They assemble, you know, given the tidbits, they can construct a building, they can construct make a city plan, you know, they can design a sewage plan, they can design a road plan, traffic congestion plan. They design, they develop, they formulate. Like Sachin and Virat have reached the level of creativity. Now they play the ball as per their design. They're able to face all kinds of bowlers. When they want, they'll put the ball into the six. So, this level, when somebody reaches, they design, they have, they visualize things to happen in that way and they make it happen that way. So, their sense of visualization increases. So, that is why the higher order thinking skills are important, because our aim should be to push the children from the lower orders to the higher order. Next, please. Am I in time or I have to conclude? How much time I have? Miss Prerna, can I know the time, please? Yeah. So we'll move ahead till such time she stops me. So suggestive verbs for
No,
revised.
ma'am, nothing like that. It's going really interesting, ma'am. But,
So
ma'am, it's almost 5 minutes, ma'am.
5 minutes. So quickly, I'll rush up a little bit. Some of the suggestive verbs or revised Bloom's taxonomy, which you can use in your classroom and lesson planning, because the whole objective of this 1 hour presentation about learning outcome and Bloom's taxonomy, the teachers will be able to plan their lesson plans well. So next, please. So these are some of the action verbs that you should be, when you're talking about, remember, you should, they'll identify, define, list, label, match. These are the verbs, not they will understand. So next, understand level, classify. When you're testing the understanding, you will not simply say they will understand. They will be able to classify, they'll compare, they'll describe, they'll distinguish. These are the verb sets that should be used and assessed. When they are talking about apply, they are applying, they calculate, they compute, they develop, they execute. So the list is quite long and it's easily available. This is nothing new that I'm telling you. This is the Bloom's taxonomy, and when you type action verbs of Bloom's taxonomy for lesson plans, you'll get it on internet, or you can ask us to provide you. So these are the specific verbs that needs to be used. When you are aiming at the higher orders, you should write that by the end of the lesson, students will be able to analyze this. They will be able to inquire. They'll be able to differentiate. When you move a little further, you give them two different situations and you ask them to assess which is better. What do they recommend? So they coordinate, they monitor, they critique. So these are the verbs. Next, when they reach the creative level, please, previous slide, please. Previous slide. When they reach, they generate and design their own plan. Like I said, they'll plan a sewage. They will make a roadmap, how the traffic should be regulated. They'll have a plan of their own, how decongestion on the roads can happen, how many flyovers will be there. So they are able to generate a design that they produce and develop. So these is to create an original product of their own and put together separate elements into a coherent whole is when they reach the creative level. They're able to visualize things and make it happen. Next. So these are some of the assessment ideas. Bloom's taxonomy you are aware of. These are cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domain. So we will now quickly talk about when we plan a lesson. It is not about cognitive level. It is about the quality of head, heart, and psychomotor. What they are able to do it with their hands, what they are able to think, and how compassion, their emotions are equally important in a classroom teaching. And of course, cognitive is there, which we focus on mostly in the classroom situation. Next. So we have to take three domains. When we talk about three domains, cognitively is all related to mind, intelligence. Affective is what they're able to do. And psychomotor is what when they involve their physical hands and legs in doing a particular thing. So cognitive domain is related to memorizing and reasoning. The affective domain is appreciate, motivation, emotional changes, the feelings that we have. Psychomotor domains, actions in doing like typing, playing, all these things. Next. So different three domains of Bloom's taxonomy, cognitive level, all three domains have levels in that. And all three domains have lower orders and higher orders. So our focus in learning outcome is on higher order of all three levels. That is when we cognitive domain के highest level पे पहुंचते हैं तो हमारा बच्चा create and evaluate करता है और analyze करता है. जब हम affective domain के highest three levels पे पहले तो वो receive करता है, हम कुछ बोलते हैं, सुनता है, फिर वो respond कर लेता है, थोड़ा बहुत value भी करता है. जब हम हायर ऑर्डर पे पहुंचते हैं तो वो ऑर्गेनाइजिंग एंड कंसेप्चुलाइजिंग आती है उसके अंदर, तब उसके कैरेक्टराइजिंग होता है, उसकी वैल्यूज उसके कैरेक्टर में दिखने लग जाती है. देयर इज अ चेंज इन कैरेक्टर व्हेन वी our lesson plan impact the affective domain of the child. Teacher can move mountains, teacher can change the child. And when we talk about psychomotor domain, it's the initially in the lower order, he'll be able to imitate, manipulate with precision. But when he reaches the highest level, he is able to do the articulation and the naturalization. Naturalization, I have already given you. Natural things happen when you do things at will. जब आप छक्का अपनी मर्जी से मार देते हो, irrespective of the ball. I have to make my country win. So that naturalization stage comes when you play with the ball. Okay, next. So cognitive domain involves knowledge and intellectual skills, and 6 hierarchical level I have already talked about. Next. This is the cognitive domain. Then the verbs associated will be arranged, defined. I've already spoken about. You can just type it on Google, and when you write verbs associated with cognitive domain, you'll get the list of keywords that you should use in the lesson plan. And when you are using the creative level, the highest level, you should use verbs like develop, plan, build, create, design. These kind of verbs should be used. Next. Similarly, when you talk about affective domain, it's an attitudinal change, it's the emotional change and the value change that you're aiming. And Bhavans is basically also focusing on the affective domain of the child. Therefore, the culture course, there's so many value-based classroom, the moral education periods, Ramakrishna mission, association with this, that, all this is to touch upon the affective domains of the child's this thing. Again, it has 5 levels I've talked about. Next. So this is the hierarchy of the affective domain of the Bloom's taxonomy: receiving, responding, valuing, organizing, and characterizing. When there is a change in character, you'll reach the highest level of the attitudinal change. Next. Same, these are the verbs. So your lesson plan should have a good mix of cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. domains. Your learning outcomes should have these are the previous slide, please. So these are the keywords you can type. जब रिसीव करता है तो बच्चा आस्क, लिसन, फोकस, बट जब वो ऑर्गेनाइजिंग लेवल पे होता है तो वो बिल्ड करता है, ही डेवलप्स, ही फॉर्मुलेट्स अ पॉलिसी, ही इज एबल टू एक्ट, ही इज एबल टू डिस्प्ले, ही इज एबल टू इन्फ्लुएंस अदर्स. अपना बिहेवियरल चेंज है उसके अंदर एंड वो दो को और बिहेवियरल चेंज लाता है. देन ही कम्स एट द इन्फ्लुएंस लेवल. So that is the highest level of the affective domain. Next. Psychomotor domain again is related, it addresses the skill part, development related to the physical damage, the bodily, the kinesthetic moments of. So it is the motor skills beyond the originally traditionally imagined manual physical skill. So these are the domains that matter. The psychomotor domain also is equally important as the cognitive. Our focus is basically on cognitive, but we should also focus on what the child is able to do physically after your lesson plan. Say, for example, in English, after you have taught, he writes something. That's the psychomotor domain. He is able to write, express his views in 5 points, 6 points. In the last, he's able to value that, he's able to showcase that in his, then there is a change in the psychomotor. What the situation is likely that psychomotor domain is very, very significant in the teaching learning process. May it be English, Hindi, math, science, social, teachers should have some learning outcomes related to the affective and psychomotor domains as well in the classroom teaching when they're planning the lesson. Next, please. So these are the levels. The from lower imitation to the highest naturalization is the psychomotor domain. जब बच्चा साइकिल सीख लेता है, पहले तो उसको सिखाए, देखो वो साइकिल चला रहा है, कैसे चला रहा है, इसको वॉच करो, ट्राई टू इमिटेट, ट्राई टू यूज योर ओन स्किल्स. वो नेचुरलाइजेशन पे आ जाता है तो वो एक धीरे से रोड पे आ जाता है. ट्रैफिक के बीच में से वो मैनोवरिंग करके भी अपने आप को सेफ रख लेता है. कभी कभी वो और ज्यादा नेचुरलाइजेशन तो दोनों हाथ छोड़ करके भी वो क्लास साइकिल की बैलेंसिंग आपने देखा होगा, विच इज वेरी रिस्की, शुड बी डन. But that's the level when they reach to this naturalization, when it becomes a permanent skill in them. Next. So these are the levels of the keywords and the verbs when then you have to use while making the lesson plan. Naturalization, imitation to naturalization. Different set of words, specific set of verbs which should be used in the lesson plans. Next. So to summarize it whole, these are the levels of all three domains: the cognitive dimension, the psychomotor domain, and the affective domain. And these are the levels teachers have to move from the lower three to the upper two or upper three levels. So our lesson plan and learning outcome should move from lower to higher. By the end of your course curriculum, students should be able to reach the higher level of competencies. Next. So let's consider some example quickly. Quick. We can escape. We have already done the example. Next. Because we are running short. Next. Next. Yeah, next. Finally, I want to give you a design where you can practice what I have taught you today as an assessment during next, please. Yeah. So this is like this chart. I'm going to share it with the Aryo sir. So now when you have already understood what kind of verbs you are going to use, you will be able to know how much cognitive level, affective level, and psychomotor domains you have touched in your lesson plan. So for this, you will do some kind of reverse planning. What reverse planning? You will plan the, or you will prepare a blueprint of the question paper. First, what question paper are you going to give in your term 2 exam? Once you have framed the question paper, you will divide it into 1 marker question, then the competencies that they are assessing, because each level is assessing a competency. So first you will plan the 1-marker questions and the competencies. Then you will plan the short answer question, that is the 2-marker questions and the competencies associated. Then you will plan the 3-mark question paper, 3-marker questions and the competencies associated. And then finally you will plan the long answers question. Your paper may be 50 marks, 100 marks, whatever, you have to divide it into the very short 1-marker, 2-marker, 3-markers and 4-markers. And then you will write the competencies you are assessing. And finally, RUAAEC, you're finally totaling up what levels you are testing, remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and grading. That will give you down below the total of how you are moving from the lower order thinking skills to teaching the higher level. So there's some reverse engineering which needs to be done here by the teachers to practice the how to write learning outcomes in the class, how to assess, measure, how to write, not only write, how to write smart, learning outcomes. And then what are the levels? So ultimately you'll be able to finally see whether your teaching is of the lower 3 levels or of the higher order. Because if we are adopting the national education policy, we have to now bring a shift from lower orders to the higher orders. So I hope I am clear in whatever objectives and outcomes I had set for the class for today 1 hour, and you'll be able to reflect upon what are the takeaways. You'll be able to do this blueprint for question papers, and if you share it with Aryo sir, it'll be really good. Thank you so much for this patient hearing, and if I have overshot the timing.
No, ma'am, not at all. It was really a very enriching and engaging session, ma'am. Like, we have been attending so many sessions on Bloom's taxonomy. Every time there is a new takeaway, and I'm very sure we'll always remember the difference between the learning outcomes and smart learning outcomes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for bringing forth all these concepts. It was really engaging, ma'am. May I now request Alka Singh, ma'am, from Bhavan KDKVM, Renupur, to propose a formal word of thanks?
Thank
Good
you.
afternoon, everyone. I'm Alka Singh from Bhavan's KDKVM. I would like to thank our resource person, Dr. Anju ma'am, for explaining the topic, framing of learning outcomes according to Bloom's taxonomy in a super way. Ma'am, you have covered the topic in such a nice way that there were many things that we were not able to clarify it in the beginning, but now we are going to implement it in our classroom. Ma'am, we appreciate your valuable insights. Your knowledge has been incredibly beneficial to us. We are very grateful for the time and effort you have dedicated to the helping understand. Ma'am, your guidance has been invaluable in navigating this topic in our classroom. We are going to implement it and we have learned a lot of new things, ma'am. I hope that this explanation is going to make our students better ones. We truly value the wisdom you have imparted on us. Thank you so much, ma'am. And we all want to listen you in future also, ma'am.
Thank you.
Please guide us in future also, ma'am. Thank you
Thank you,
so
sir.
much, ma'am.
Always welcome.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Anju Tandon. Thank you very much. Actually, I have listened to her in one of the in-source program in Mehta Vidyalaya, and there I have attended that program for 1 hour or so. So at that time, I thought that it is a wonderful program and should be conveyed to all the teachers. Ma'am is very busy actually. The problem with the madam is she is very busy. And off and on, she used to go for CBSE, NCRT, so many programs, so many things. The member of so many committees is there. So it is very difficult to catch her.
Sir, thank you. Sir,
But we will wait, ma'am. We will wait for you, ma'am.
Not
It was
busy
really
for Bhavan,
very...
sir. Always there for Bhavan.
We are very lucky that
lives in our heart.
We are very lucky that you have spared some time for our teachers. Thank you very much. And I am sure that our teachers might have learned a lot. So thank you very much once again to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So kind of you.
Thank you, Anil Sharma sir. Thank you, Prerna ma'am. Thank you, Simple ma'am. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, participants, for listening the program so nicely and participating in the discussion. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you, ma'am, once again, and thank you, everyone. Before we close for the proceedings of the day, thank you so much, ma'am. Before we close for the proceedings of the day, let us join our hands to pray to the Almighty.
ॐ ध्यान शान्ति अन्तरिक्षः शान्तिः पृथिवी शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिः वनस्पतय शान्तिः शान्तिर्विश्वे देवाः शान्ति ब्रह्मः शान्तिः सर्वं शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः सामा शान्तिरेधि शान्तिः 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 ॐ शान्ति